So I think this one is going to be mostly interesting for executive and founders, but I would easily argue that this is an important topic for everybody working in a company to be aware and know about it. What I'm talking about is the difference between building a company and building the product the company is building. So this, why does this matters is because there are at times opposite objectives, and there's a lot of confusion that exists in and usually when you have lower level people in the company, more ICs, first tier managers who get frustrated with the executive team. It's very commonly that it falls under that one element to it. In some occasions, you can have the opposite. You can have that the ICs and first level managers are frustrated at the executive team for not building enough of the company as a way of supporting them while they're building the product. Okay, so this is why I make these videos. Just a sideline is I covered this a little bit in my book, and then I created these videos and I knew I was going to have to do a follow up. I knew there was more things to actually put in, but it's kind of a never ending things, etc. So I hope my somewhat frustration with the fact that I should have covered this better is not going to be coming up too much and too strongly in this video. Anyway. The big difference between the two things is that the product is usually very, very visible. It's especially if you were to work on something super trendy, so consumer electronics, consumer tech, something that is very visible, something that you or pretty much anybody could be able to use and work on. It becomes extremely easy to make it relatable for people to just really focusing everything about the product. And if you think about iconic product companies. Namely, Apple is one of them, but definitely not. You really can lose track of building the company side because that's not really something that anybody really talks about. It very quickly in strong product-driven company takes a second seat, a back seat, a back burner position, because the product is just so important and you have so limited amount of attention from people to talk about things, the press, your end users, even the staff, that it becomes product. And what it conveys is a misguided sense that this is the entire story. Building the company is about building the ability to actually build a product. And it's something that is very, very difficult to do because it's something that is changing over time based on what things are going. Now, if you're in the lucky few who are in an environment that just keeps on getting better, right? You're like everything that the team is doing is a raging success and things are going upward. Then what you'll notice is just like, the difficulty of building the company is kind of like growing. You have to handle this growth. You have to create these new departments. You have to onboard new people. You have things which sound like an easy task because money is coming in, everybody's happy, success is in here, and the praises are here. Sounds like it's a perfect situation, but it is a somewhat difficult situation to actually handle correctly, and being able to scale the right things at the right time. Most likely, what happens is that you have to. It's never really a straight line up or down. It's kind of like goes up and with little steps as you're going, and this moment down, you have to just take things back that what you were doing when you were building the company, etc. So this is the very obvious and visible part of the topic. The part that is a little bit less visible about the topic is that sometimes you have to be building things, you have to be doing things in the context of building the product, but with a priority on building the company. And if you haven't seen my video yet about this, go and watch the delegation and ownership video because I kind of hint at this particular topic when I am referring to the exercise of building ownership as a monitoring about how things were being built rather than the fact that things were being built. And this is because in this context, the measure of success of an execution, and in this case, this context is about trying to develop ownership, is really based on how the execution happened rather than the execution delivered. And the piece in here is that a person that was empowered to own a piece of the company, project, whatever it is, scope, any process that you would have, any kind of execution, any kind of plan, it can be anything at all, engineering, product, but even outside. And if this person failed to deliver the outcome, you could still have the win that you're looking for if your top goal in here is to develop a culture of ownership rather than actually having product coming out. And there's this context where, you could see that you're getting very lucky, or that you're capable of growing and executing, but it's coming up at a high cost in growing tension in the company, or growing cost, growing inefficiency, growing inefficacy, and how things are going. So basically, you're getting to that finishing line, but it becomes a Pyrrhic victory more and more, right? So you're wondering at some point, when am I going to run out of cat lives? When is my luck going to run out? When am I going to actually crash and burn and never really going to be able to actually get back on my 2 feet? So you're taking a step back and thinking, okay, I'm going to focusing on building the company at this moment rather than just building the product at any cost. Now, the reason why this matters is because, very commonly, and this is a natural side effect of people who are building the product, you're put in the context of focus. It's not a negative thing. It's a great way to actually execute in focus. I'm just saying, like, this is what you have to do. You build this flagship product, which is the most important thing, and you have all this environment around you and a lot of teams supporting you. And that suddenly creates, on purpose, a very keyhole vision of what really goes on. And so when you don't see a function delivering what really is going on, and you've really been told that this product is really what matters the most for the company, it becomes very, very difficult to understand why is there these other things and these other priorities are coming in. And that's because building the company is something that is always here, always in the background. It always is here. You can take a little bit of a sidestep. You can take a little bit of a back burner. It can take you have digestion phases when you build a company. And but it's always here. And at times it's just what it really is. The reason I'm bringing this topic so explicitly, so consciously, it's precisely because for some weird reason, this isn't really being brought in. This isn't really being discussed openly in many, many contexts, but it really is what it is. And I'll give you a couple of very specific examples. So one of the things that is a typical build a product versus build a company kind of situation is recruitment. You would have, like, especially junior engineers or junior managers who are really going into it, and they always have a bit of this fallacy that they never really pull the trigger, and I'll explain why, but you could dramatically accelerate the execution of what you're doing by just hiring, a flock of people. So assuming for a second that we could do that. We could hire hundreds of people in a company, like double, triple the size of the company within months. And I mean like sub 6 months. And as suddenly all these people would coming in, the reality is that building the company effort means that these people will never actually be able to actually be productive and delivering on things. Never is a bit of a big word, but very, very extremely unlikely to be productive, because you need to be able to onboard these people, let them go on the right tracks, make sure that all of your infrastructure that is in the company to onboard, to train, to ramp them up, to catch them up on everything that's going on is as efficient as possible, so it doesn't take forever, because, an onboarding process that can last, many months is not as uncommon as people may think. And that means that, your ability to actually build a product and leveraging this access to resources is actually limited on terms of how ready the company is to be growing at that kind of pace. But from the perspective of the person as a product, you would be, but I need these people yesterday to do X, all these different things, and we were going to go fast, and I thought we were going to be, aggressive and all these different things. I am quoting some of the sentences that I heard over the years. And it's all rooted in frustration, because you don't understand as, like, look, even if we could, because usually you can't. We couldn't be bringing, like, we couldn't double the size of the team that you have over the next 3 months and it work effectively, right? It would be a complete disaster. It would be a huge disruption. It would be a massive problem. You would spend all of your time onboarding these people. And that's when these digestion phases of the company comes in. You can create a function, right? And you can even have a completely supporting function. Let's say logistics, so it has nothing to do with products, well, very little to do with products. And we can build that function, bring like 3, 4, 5 people into this team. You would then need to be able to actually digest and let's see that team do what they can do to see what would be your next move to build that team, right? You would have to wait for them to have had the opportunity to start taking on a couple of projects, effect a couple of changes, and see them, happening before it goes. Now, I'm using short time scale things as a way of not getting people to lose their mind. But the reality is that this digestion phase is this time that you need to actually see the effect of the company can very quickly grow to 6, 12, 18 months on some functions. So you can't really wait 18 months for anything to happen. And so you have to be going on and then, building the company at the same time. An analogy that I liked, which the first time I heard it, it wasn't as fun as it is to me right now, was when I joined DJI, I was told that we're basically a pit crew, but we had to fix the car while the car was racing because there was not going to be any stopping point at any point in time, which is not unique to DJI and quite a great way of actually looking at things. But what it really helps you is that you understand that not only the car has to race, but your ability to actually support the car that races has to also grow and evolve at the same time as it comes in. Now, again, this is something that's, I saw some people taking it really, really instinctively and naturally, but I want to talk and explain it very explicitly. I'm not going to go around into many examples that goes in, but this is the hiring, I think, is one really where is the biggest one that you really, really have. And for the product size, you really have to be accepting these kinds of things. My recommendation to the founders, the executives, those who are on the build the company first side of things, is that you always need to have these two sides really presented clearly for you. You need to have your building the company to-do list. You need to have your product building to-do list. And then try to have at least, a quick exercise on a whiteboard or piece of paper about what is the product side waiting from the company side to be able to execute better. And that could be that, you don't have a recruiter, which is, again, I'm back into the hiring. But one of the funny thing is that when I was advising founders directly, one of the funniest things is their biggest surprise was how effective it was for them to bring in a recruiter, a technical recruiter for helping building the company. That's a very small building the company moment that was dramatically helping the building the product side of things. But many of them got sucked into directly put their time into building the product rather than putting their time bringing this recruiter. And this is where you find yourself in this weird vicious cycle that all of your attention that goes into the product is starting impacting the product by preventing you from building the company that is building the product. Right. So that's why I talk about what I do with the baseline I used in my book, which is like, the way to build the teams and the tech products and the teams behind them, is because really this is not about my way of doing things. Why I'm preaching is not just about building the product for the sake of building the product. It's not about throwing all the resources that you have behind this and then, shutting down everything that you have and then crunching and crunching and crunching. And I still see a lot of that kind of culture being, plastered all over LinkedIn like a badge of honor. And it's always very, very weird for me because I can make you the point that no matter what stage in the company you are, you're always going to have this build a company and build a product at the same time that's going to be happening. It's just not going to be different things. And you will definitely see that people were going to be a little bit too enamored with one or the other. Like very commonly, Silicon Valley mindset is really focused on the product development side of things. But you will see people who are, enamored of building the company a little bit too much. One of the things is this chapter that I covered in my book again, I call the process love affair, where people are really going over building the processes and the structure that you have in your company because it has a really comforting effect to have all this structure and all these steps, but they're not really thinking for a second about the other part of what is the company, which is, are your people really going to be able to massage all these processes, or is this becoming a cartoonish episode of The Office where Dwight is asking Jim to just drop the paper in one little bucket just to only move it into the next one? All these things do happen, and they all really at the junction of building the company versus the product. And you really have to, get there. And whatever stage you're in, you're always going to have to do both. So when I'm seeing these things on LinkedIn, it's just like, you guys are missing the point about what's going on. You are getting sucked into the, I feel productive, but I'm just busy. I just, keep myself busy. I'm a hamster in my wheel. I'm running around, like building the product, and it feels really great. But actually, I'm just back to at the very beginning what I was saying. You're taking chances. You're running through your cat lives, and eventually you're going to run out of this because you actually have to be building the company. So there is a last point that I want to be leaving on this topic, because I think I covered this whole thing. The whole building of the company, I'm going to touch on this for a second. The whole aspect of building the company really comes back down to multiple things. It's building teams, it's building functions. The way I like to do it is that you don't really do it in an opportunistic fashion, which is a very, very big temptation that happens, especially in startup stages. What I mean by opportunistic is that you know a guy that knows a guy, and that means that this person could come in, would be interested in coming in, and that brings that capability into it. You try not to do that. I know that's very, very tempting, what you try to do at the very least is that you create a functional map of what are the capabilities that you need in your company. That's that company building sheet that I was talking about. And then you say the kind of things that you would like to do. Is it going to be a full-time function? Is it going to be a part-time function? Is this an internal function? Is it an external function? And that will decide to you, do you build a team? Do you hire a person? Do you bring a contractor? Do you hire a company outside that's going to do the work? You're going to figure out exactly where it is. And that really, really helps you figuring out what you really want to do. That requires the company building person to have a an object-oriented mindset, right? And I'm using a software analogy here because it really is what it is. And what I mean by this is that when you're in a startup and then you're busy building the product and going in, everybody wears multiple hats, and then you have all of these sentences and phrases that comes around about, this is the startup life, you put wear hats and everything. That's all good. But you got to be able to just coming around and realize, like, this is the hat that I should really be wearing. This is the hat that's going to land on my head 50% of the time. That's okay. And these are all the random hats that actually should be external functions that I should be relying on rather than picking up. I'll pick it up right now, but I should really rely on to some extent. Again, this matters for the exercise of building the company. And that really will help you having the product side, just building the product and going in. Right. So back into the whole center of my story. The importance of these two topics. The importance of these two topics really boils down to the fact that for the executive, it's very, very important for them to really have this understanding. I think it's very important for them to also communicate about where this capability really are. It's important to just remind people that they're wearing multiple hats, but eventually these hats are going to get specialized. This helps with people who are having difficulty growing with the company, because believe it or not, there are some people who really, really love the early stages of the company, wearing all the hats. They love the diversity of tasks. They love to be able to touch multiple things. They love the exposure. They love the learning experience, etc. But as a company grows, you're going to have to tell them we need to specialize so we're more efficient, and we have we go deeper in the depth of the complexity of the problem rather than staying at the surface level. So it helps with that, but it also helps with setting up expectations about when something can be fixed and how fix will be fixed. That also gives you the time to get the feedback, get the people to process this information on the product side and the other things, so you understand how these functions in a company should build. On the IC level, it's very, very important to understand that everything that you do, especially when you start going into the rockstar mindset, is really you may be the very famous race car pilot, but you're not going anywhere on your own if you don't have the team of engineers that design the car, the team of logistic guys who move the car over to the pit, to the racetrack, the pit crew who is taking care of the car and taking care of you when it happens, and all of the other people who are promoting you, the marketing team who's getting the sponsorship, etc., etc. You are the face of a long, big machine behind you. It is what it is. It's not an unpleasant place, but it has a lot of negative side to it as well. But never lose of the sight that you cannot do what you're doing if the machine behind you isn't built to support it. And that really, really helps to have this kind of communication going in. So, right, I could go on. I don't really want to. I want to try to keep my videos a little bit shorter than what they are. But the long story short about this is that you will benefit to take an extra step into being more active, proactive about these distinctions about where is this a product building moment? Is it a company building moment? And to talk openly about it. So you actually set the expectation is that, my top priority here is to establish a company building moment or a product building moment, etc. It is more difficult for the executives because they have to do both. And they have to balance the act with both, etc. But for everybody in the company, it's really, really important to understand that the company in itself, it's not a person, it's not a machine. Every analogy you can do, but it is an aggregation of multiple things that is creating a capability to produce these products. And the product can steal the show, can monopolize the attention, but you got to understand that for you to be able to build a certain quality of product, certain complexity of product, you need to have behind you the machine that is going to be capable of supporting you to actually get there, right? No one is going to build an iPhone from their garage out of, DIY tools they got at Home Depot. It's never going to happen, right? Nevers, right? You get the point. I'm generalizing to simplify the entire message. So if you invest yourself in this topic, you're gonna realize that a lot of these weird frustration and subtle problems, they just disappear.